My step-siblings framed me for assault and mom called me a jealous failure, kicking me out. 10 years later she returned begging for help, but I gave her this condition. So I'm gonna try and keep this as short as possible, which is going to be hard, but I'm still gonna try, just bear with me. All of this started when I was 9 years old and my parents decided that they were going to get a divorce. Their relationship had deteriorated over time, and even though they had tried to make it work for a very long time for my sake, it had come to a point where their marriage could not be repaired. I was very upset about the divorce because I was in denial, to be honest. They had shared custody of me after the divorce, but I just kept trying to bring them back together. I don't know what I was hoping to achieve, but I just thought that if they had stayed together for some time for my sake, maybe I could get them back together for my sake again. It was foolish of me, but I was just 9 years old, so I don't really know what I was thinking. And I guess my mother should have been a bit more forgiving, but the more that I tried to talk my father up in front of her and make it seem like he was the perfect guy for her, the more annoyed she would get with me, and we ended up fighting quite frequently. Things got worse when 2 years after her divorce, she started dating my stepdad, and I did not take it well when she introduced me to him and his 2 kids, twins, a girl and a boy who were 2 years younger than me. My dad hadn't introduced me to any women by then, and even if he had been seeing other people, I hadn't found out about it. So my mom's decision to introduce me to her new boyfriend seemed like a betrayal to my father, even though they were divorced. But my 11-year-old brain was not smart or emotionally mature enough to understand that, and I threw a fit about it. I was not happy with my mother's decision, and our relationship got worse. There were times where I would refuse to even see her and would only spend time with her when my dad would request me to do so. This went on for about 3 years, and with time, I started acting less bratty about these things, but I still didn't like my stepdad or my step-siblings. But that was mostly because I did not get a good vibe from any of them, and it always felt like none of them really wanted me to be a part of the family, and I felt the same way towards them. When I was around 14 years old, my mom decided to marry my stepdad, and I had to finally accept them as my family because I couldn't run away from it anymore. I don't think any of us were happy about it, yet we decided to put on an act for my mother's sake, but that was it. In reality, neither was I willing to put in an effort to get along with my so-called new family, and nor did they seem very interested in making me feel like a part of their family. Unfortunately, we were all forced together when my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer when I was 16, and his condition got worse really fast, so I had to move in with my mother permanently. I would obviously still try to visit him a lot and spend as much time as I possibly could with him, but it was still not enough, and before I could even start to process it, he was gone. The next couple of months following my dad's passing were really difficult for me emotionally, and I felt completely alone. I did have friends at school and they were nice enough to me, but as soon as I came back home, I would feel like disappearing. Although there was no point in wishing that I disappeared when I was at home, because the rest of my family, I was as good as invisible. My mom had tried to be there for me for a couple of weeks after my dad's passing, but then, she got busy with her work and stopped putting in an effort with me. And asked for my stepdad and my step-siblings. They had nothing to do with me earlier, and they continued to have nothing to do with me afterward as well. It seemed like everyone was just indifferent to my pain and misery. Hardly anybody spoke to me, and I would cry myself to sleep almost every night. I guess I was depressed, but nobody bothered to check up on me or take me to a psychiatrist to figure out what was wrong with me, so I had no idea what was going on with me, and I remember feeling really lost and confused. And things started to get worse because my mental and emotional state just didn't seem to get better with time, and it started to affect my grades, my appearance, and even my relationship with my friends at school. Of course, I started doing pretty badly academically, and my grades started slipping. I wasn't much to look at anyway, and then I started losing weight quite rapidly. And it wasn't even just the weight, I also started losing a lot of hair for some reason. Because of all of this, I became really insecure and stuff and started isolating myself from everyone. Even when my friends would try to reach out to me, I would lash out at them, and I lost a lot of people in the process. The school even got in touch with my mother at one point, so they could let her know that there was something seriously wrong with me and it was affecting my grades and stuff, but instead of trying to figure out what was wrong, she started accusing me of refusing to get better on purpose. My relationship with my mother was already quite strained by then, and her accusations led to a lot of fights because I couldn't explain to her that this was out of my control and that I needed help. Even when I tried to tell her, she would just dismiss all of it and tell me that I was being overdramatic and that I just needed to snap out of it and start working hard. My situation was just really frustrating, and one day, I got into a nasty fight with my step-siblings because of my frustration. I don't remember what exactly had happened, but I just remember that I had been passing the living room so I could go up to my room when I caught my step-siblings pointing at me and giggling about something. I was already pretty self-conscious by then, and I don't know why, that stupid little thing just ticked me off so much that I confronted them about it immediately, when I would usually just ignore this kind of petty behavior. It wasn't as though I was not used to it, they were just the kind of people who would do these things for fun to try and get on my nerves, but until then, I hadn't let them have the satisfaction of getting a reaction out of me. I guess, it was just a particularly bad day and they managed to rub me the wrong way. And even when I confronted them, they did not apologize to me and made some really rude remarks about my appearance. So I lost it, and I started screaming at them and they started screaming back at me, and there was a lot of cursing after that. Eventually, our parents had to get involved and separate us because things were about to get physical. When they questioned us about what exactly was going on, I told them the truth, while my step-sibling told them that I had just started screaming at them for no reason and they had only been minding their own business. Instead of believing me, no matter how much I insisted on it, my mother believed her step-kids over me and told me that I needed to start behaving myself or there would be no place for me in their home anymore and that she was serious. It was incredibly unfair and I hated the fact that she was doing this to me, but there really wasn't anything that I could do about it, so I decided to just suck it up until I could leave home for college. At the time, I had no idea about what was about to come, and if I had known, I probably would have just left home on my own instead of trying to behave myself and keep my temper under control. Anyway, a couple of months after that incident, I was kicked out by my own mom. Our parents had left for the weekend to attend a wedding and had left me and my step-siblings back home. A couple of months had passed since the last blow-up I had with them, and even though they had been trying their best to get on my nerves, I hadn't lost my temper at them and I'd just been hoping that they would get bored and leave me alone. So the weekend itself was pretty uneventful and I thought that it was quite successful because we just ignored each other for 2 whole days and got through the weekend without hurting one another. I thought that this could be the start of something new, and technically, it was. It was the start of my life without my mom, because when she and my stepdad returned from their trip, my step-siblings accused me of assaulting them. And like always, my mom believed them, never mind the fact that there were no real bruises on them or the fact that the neighbors hadn't heard anything either. No cops or ambulances had been called, but sure, they were telling the truth. Apparently, in the story that my step-siblings had cooked up, they had been discussing their grades and I had asked them to stop, but they didn't and continued to talk amongst themselves. Then, apparently, I lost my temper, and I rushed at them with the intention of hurting them, and they actually had to fight me off. I guess they had done a pretty good job while they had been narrating this very scary recollection of something that never happened to our parents, because when they decided to speak to me about it, they seemed pretty convinced by whatever they had been told, and no matter how hard I tried, it felt like they had already made up their minds. I brought up a lot of valid points as I mentioned earlier, but they told me that they did not believe a word of what I was saying and that I was starting to become dangerous because I was a jealous failure, according to my stepdad. My mom told me that she had given me a lot of chances to change myself and become a better daughter, but I had refused, and now, she couldn't keep me, her old family, with her, at the cost of her new family. I did everything that I could to change her mind. I begged, I pleaded, and I even threatened to report her because I was almost 17 at the time, but I was still a minor, so she couldn't legally kick me out. But she did not budge. She told me that I was almost an adult and I had made my bed, so I had to lie in it now, and she couldn't constantly keep on forgiving me and keep taking her husband and his kids for granted. She told me that she was actually doing a favor by letting me go because that way, her husband wouldn't call the cops on me for trying to hurt his kids. It was ridiculous because it showed how she actually believed those 2 filthy little liars, but not her daughter. So eventually, I did end up getting kicked out, and since my mother had given everybody in the family specific instructions to stay away from me, I had no other option but to reach out to my dad's side of the family and ask them for help. My mom's side of the family had always been closer to me, or at least they were, for as long as my mom was close to me. Ever since I was a child, we didn't really have a good relationship with my dad's side of the family, mostly because he did not have a good relationship with his parents. Even while my dad had been alive, we hardly had any contact with them. After his demise, I hadn't spoken to them at all. So it was quite awkward for me to reach out to them, but when I explained my situation to them, they allowed me to stay with them. My grandparents were not inherently bad people, they just had a different idea of how my dad should have led his life, and my dad didn't like being controlled, I guess. Anyway, regardless of their equation with my father, they accepted me when I decided to ask them to help me out. But that didn't exactly solve all my problems, because I was still just a 17-year-old with hardly any money of my own, just about to graduate from high school and start college, but no idea how to cover my tuition. My grandparents had offered me a place to stay, but I still had to contribute to the expenses of the household since both of them were retired and I didn't want to be a financial burden on them. Somehow, with a lot of help from the few friends that I still had, their parents, and their connections, I managed to take out a student loan to pay for college. Along with that, I also worked through college, and I was able to graduate with good grades. I had been flunking when I was in high school, so it wasn't possible for me to get into any great colleges, but I decided to turn my life around after I received my first and only acceptance letter. I did my best because not succeeding in life was just not an option for me anymore after everything that I had been through. I continued to work hard after my graduation and was able to move out of my grandparents' house soon enough, even though I have still kept in touch with them, and I'm really grateful for whatever they did for me. And now that 10 years have passed since I got kicked out of my home, I guess I could say that I've finally made it. I started as a sales associate, but I worked my way up and I'm currently working as a regional manager. I'm the youngest amongst all the others in the company. So I've achieved quite a lot and I'm happy with my life now. And that's why I'm in a dilemma right now, whether I should help my mother out or not, because that would mean allowing her back into my life after 10 years of no contact. She turned up at my house a couple of days ago, and she was in a really bad state because her clothes were all a little torn here and there and her shoes were worn out, which is why I took pity on her and invited her so I could offer her some food, a conversation, and a few extra clothes. Apparently, life hadn't been kind to her in the past couple of years and she's lost pretty much everything, which is why she showed up to ask me for my help. After I was kicked out, she regretted her decision a lot but tried to keep her mind off of it by devoting herself to her new family. She started her own business about a year after I left and it was doing really well, but her family talked her into shutting it down and selling it so they could use the money to start something new as a family. It took some convincing, but she agreed to it and sold her business about 5 years ago. With that money, she and her family started again, but unfortunately, this time, that business did not take off. They struggled to get by for a couple of years, during which, her husband ended up having an affair, and 2 years ago, she got divorced after she found out. Unfortunately, even though she spent a lot of money on fighting for what she was owed in this marriage, she walked away with pretty much nothing because it was true that they didn't have anything to give to her. Regardless of all the sacrifices that she had made in the course of their marriage, she didn't get alimony or even settlement. They did get some money after they sold the house and split the profit, and that's what she had been living off of the past 2 years, since the divorce. She's been working 2 jobs for the past 2 years so she can maintain a certain standard of living, but a couple of months ago, she got laid off at one. She had been finding it very difficult to pay rent and eventually, 3 weeks back, her landlord evicted her because she hadn't been able to pay rent for quite a few months now. Even though she had been trying to find a second job again, her health has been preventing her from doing so because she has developed severe joint pains recently, and she suspects arthritis, but she hasn't even been able to afford to go to the doctor for a diagnosis yet. Apparently, she had been living with a friend from work, who lives a couple of buildings away from me, and that's how she spotted me one day. She asked around for a bit and then, a couple of days ago, she finally worked up the courage to come to me. While she was visiting, she told me everything about her life in the past 10 years, and she also told me that since she had been evicted, her friend had been kind enough to let her stay with her, but now, it was clear that even she and her family were growing tired of her, and even though they hadn't said it to her, it was evident that she had overstayed her welcome in their house. So now, she was here to ask me to let her stay with me for some time, at least until she was back on her own 2 feet again. She apologized to me for how she had treated me in the past and told me that she was really proud of the fact that I had been able to succeed in my life, in spite of the way that I had been treated as a child. It was a much needed conversation and I got the closure that I really needed, but I'm still not sure if I want to help her out or not. That would need me to let her stay with me, and I really value my lifestyle the way it is. Besides, with my mother, it's already complicated and I don't know if I have forgiven her yet or not. But refusing to help her out doesn't seem right either, and I'm just really confused about what to do. Will I be the a-hole if I refuse to help my mother out by letting her stay with me? Update 1. Hey, thank you so much for all the helpful comments and advice on my post. I see that most people are divided on what I should do, and honestly, so was I. So after going through the comments, I decided to speak to my friends about this. Most people that I'm friends with right now have no idea that my past was so troubled. Only a couple of people who have been friends with me since high school know about these things, so I decided to go to them because they have known me for the longest and they know my situation as well. They told me that my mother was going through a really difficult phase and it was probably not easy for her to come to ask me for help, but she did because she thought that she could count on me. The only dilemma that I'm facing here is that I never felt like I could count on my mother at any point in my life, which is why I don't feel inclined to help her out right now. The fact that I like living by myself is secondary. And they were right. The only reason I was having second thoughts about helping my mother out was because she had turned her back on me when I needed her. Keeping that aside, I had no reason not to help her out. I felt terrible about what she was going through and I wouldn't wish it on anybody, so had it been anybody in her place, I would have agreed to help them out without a second thought. My friends knew that about me, so the questions that they asked me were relatively simple. if I wanted to be the kind of person who would hold on to 10-year-old feud just out of vindictiveness, or if I wanted to start again because my mother had faced enough punishment for everything that she had done. And when they put it that way, the choice was very clear to me, so I decided to reach out to my mom, and I told her that she was welcome to come stay with me until she managed to figure out another way to live by herself. When I called her up to tell her the good news, she broke down into tears and started apologizing profusely once again. She told me that for the past 10 years, all she had done was regret the way she had treated me, and several times, she had even wanted to reach out to me, but when she had tried to speak to my paternal grandparents to find out a way to contact me, they always told her that I was better off without her and had refused to entertain her request to put her in touch with me or even tell her what I was up to. It was by some miracle that she had found me recently, and she never wanted to let me go again because that had been the biggest mistake of her life, and she told me that she felt like the biggest fool for missing out on 10 years of my life and watching me turn it all around, especially on the basis of what her husband and her stepkids had said. It was clear on the phone call that she really regretted everything, and it was really difficult for me not to end up crying along with her because these were feelings that I hadn't thought about in a really long time. So after crying for a couple of minutes, she finally hung up and we decided that she would move in with me in a couple of days. She has told me that she's going to try and bear most of her own expenses, so I don't need to worry about her becoming a burden on me, and she'll be out of my hair as soon as it's possible for her. But honestly, I'm not too worried about that. I'm just looking forward to having a fresh start with my mother. Update 2, hi. So I can understand that a lot of people were really skeptical about my decision to help my mother out and let her stay with me, but honestly, I don't really regret it. She has been with me for almost 2 weeks now, and it's been great, to be honest. I guess I had mentioned that I liked living alone, and I really did, but after my mother moved in with me, the place really brightened up. She cooks all my meals for me, even though she has to go out to work herself too. It's nice because one of the best memories of my childhood used to be cooking with my mother. Even though I wasn't very good at it, she made it up with her skills because she was always really good in the kitchen. It appears that she even remembers all my favorite stuff from when I was younger and has been whipping up a lot of those recipes once again, which makes me really nostalgic and emotional. We also try and spend some time talking to each other about everything that's going on in our lives and the way we spent these past 10 years. Most of the time, she just ends up apologizing for not being a good mother the first time around, and recently, she even told me that she wasn't sure that she had ever been a good enough mother to deserve a daughter like me, who had welcomed her back into my life in spite of everything that had happened. So I really don't see any reason to regret my decision to invite her to stay with me, and I'm really happy that I decided to make things right with her, because part of me had always wondered what life would have been like if she had still been in it, and now I know. I could have held onto that grudge for the rest of my life, but I'm glad that I chose not to, and I'm really happy with how things turned out. I also had a little chat with my grandparents, and they told me that my mother had indeed reached out to them a lot of times over the past couple of years to find out how I was doing or where I was, and every single time, they had decided not to tell her anything about me because they hated what she had done to me. I have to say that I really would have preferred it if they had told me about my mom's attempts to contact me or find out about me so I could decide for myself what I wanted, but I can understand that whatever they did came from a place of concern, and I didn't make a big deal out of it. So, things are going pretty well as of now, and I'm happy. Update 3, hi. So it's been almost 3 years since my last update, and a lot of things have changed, but for the better, and I just felt like posting an update here for everyone to know. So first things first, my mother and I are still quite involved and present in each other's lives, and we have managed to let the past go with grace and dignity. She stayed with me for almost 8 months, after which she had saved up enough to get an apartment of her own again, and I even managed to get her a job with a friend of mine that pays well enough and doesn't require her to work 2 jobs. She visits me quite often, and now that she has recently become a grandmother, the visits have become more frequent, and sometimes she stays over because I need a lot of her help since I'm still a working woman. So, yes, coming to that, I gave birth to my son about 3 months ago, and it's been a wonderful feeling and journey so far. My fiancé and I have been together for the past 2.5 years, and we had actually been planning on getting married a while ago, but then I found out that I was pregnant, and I really did not want to be pregnant in a wedding dress, so now we are getting married a couple of months later since our son is here. My grandpa and my mom are walking me down the aisle since my grandma passed away last year. Initially, I had planned on having my grandparents walk me down the aisle and had asked my mom to be a bridesmaid, but unfortunately, my grandma couldn't make it. Anyway, the wedding is going to take place in a few months, and I'm really excited for it. Now that I am a mother myself, my mother has made it a point to tell me that she knows for a fact that I'm going to be a far better mother than she had been. I know for a fact that she still regrets everything that went wrong, and I know that if I had been in her place, it probably wouldn't have been easy for me to deal with it either, because now that I am a mother, I guess it's easier for me to understand how horrible she must have felt when she realized that she had been wrong about everything. I know she wasn't perfect and I know that she regrets it, and that's good enough for me. But right now, everything is just perfect in my life with my mom, my fiancé, my son, and even my work. Sometimes when I think about my past and how awful everything was, I can hardly believe that things are so great now, and it reminds me to be thankful for everything that I have, because this is what I had worked so hard for, and I'm just really proud of myself.